What's happening, everybody? Appreciate you tuning back in. The Crypto Boss is back. What we're going to do is we're going to keep this one pretty high level. We're going to talk about sort of the traditional markets. We're going to talk about different global currencies. And then, I'm going to dive into the Bitcoin and Ethereum charts and probably get a little more technical there. So I say it's going to be high level, but it might not. First, we're going to get into some news. This guy here is the CBOE global market hints at launching Ethereum futures. So this is actually really interesting to me because more or less the whole idea, I guess I'll read a couple of these lines first, is according to Business Insider, the new investment product will be based on Gemini's underlying Ethereum market and could launch by the end of 2018. So that's relatively soon. It says the introduction of the first Ethereum-based derivative could also lead to further investment products such as Ethereum exchange-traded funds. And that right there is what everybody over the past couple of months has just been dying to hear is, we need an ETF, we need an ETF. And I've kind of been on the more bearish front of all of this just purely because I don't think anything in crypto is anywhere near ready for an ETF. But I think long-term it's essential, right? And the idea of getting an ETF, you have to go through a futures trading market like this. You need to create Ethereum futures if you want to get an Ethereum ETF, and same goes for Bitcoin and so on and so forth. And the reason for that is futures contracts, futures markets tend to price the asset class more accurately, for lack of a better term, is it reduces volatility in a market. And that's kind of the idea, I believe, and also from a different perspective is the CBOE. They obviously want to launch Ethereum futures, Ethereum ETFs, and so on and so forth, just so they can rake in the ton of capital that they will be getting on a daily basis from all of us trading these things. But that's kind of another topic. So one thing that really stood out to me is this tweet by Preston here, and it says, launching futures contracts on a cryptocurrency where 70% of the coins outstanding were known to be in the hands of fewer than 100 people, which may well have been born out of an unlawful securities offering, is unacceptable. And so this guy makes a great point. And he's basically just saying, like, listen, there are so few people that own so much of Ethereum, and all on top of the fact that it could have been an unlawful securities offering back when Ethereum had their ICO, etc. And that's not something for us to decide. People with higher pay grades get to decide that sort of deal. But it does bring up a valid point, and that is, the manipulation factor that the SEC has been constantly harping on with these guys right here, the ETFs. And I've been on the more bearish side of things when it comes to the ETF approvals, and that's what people have been, hoping for the past couple months. I don't think anything in crypto is anywhere near ready for an ETF. Not even Bitcoin, the driver, the mother, the ship, or the captain of the ship, I should say. I don't think Bitcoin's even ready for an ETF, just because I think the real world value, the use case scenarios does not live up to the hype yet. And then first and foremost, like before even all of that, the technology is, the market cap is ridiculously low for not just Bitcoin, but for the entire cryptocurrency market as a whole. It's extremely low. We've talked about this in past videos, is there are S&P 500, single S&P 500 companies that are worth more than the entire crypto market combined. And so with that, you know that there can be massive manipulation, there can be big whales, there can be big, massive volatility. And I don't know, like maybe a futures market is sort of the way to mitigate some of that volatility. But, Preston makes a good point. So, this is something to think about. I wanted to get back into some of this other news and talk a little bit more high level on kind of the global economies and what's happening in the world. Is first and foremost, as we look at this news here, and a lot of it has to do with real life companies, right? Like a lot of people in the crypto space are looking at just these different coins, these utility tokens or these security tokens, and they're just looking to buy some tokens. And that's great, but we've talked about this in the past, is buying a token does not mean you're buying a part of a company. It's not the same thing as buying a stock. Buying a stock, you are entitled to a portion of earnings. You are entitled to a portion of that company, whereas buying a token, you are nowhere near guaranteed any part of that company. You are basically betting that that token will rise in value based on some use case. And that is something extremely important to kind of understand the difference. And even with Bitcoin, is in this past bubble that we saw, it wasn't necessarily due to anything technology related. It was just due to hype. Like, it was a true bubble. And that's okay. Like, that's what happens in especially in emerging markets like this. It just happens. And the nice thing is, now we're kind of starting to see different headlines reading that these crypto companies that had these massive ICOs that are like these exchange coins. Like, this one is a perfect example. Huobi acquires public firm for $70 million. Huobi is a very, well-renowned exchange, and they bought a public firm for $70 million because they had the capital to do it, and they think that it has some, underlying value to their business. And this is when things get really interesting, is when these crypto, startups, these crypto firms start buying up publicly traded firms. That becomes quite interesting to me. And then on top of that is when these cryptocurrencies start to be like truly securitize different securities, like, for lack of a better term, is when these different securities, like real estate or the bonds or whatever it is, when cryptocurrency starts to enter those, hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars of assets, that's when I think we're going to see a really, parabolic rise in cryptocurrency. Like, that's when I think a true bull market can actually exist in crypto, is when those sort of things start to happen. And this is kind of like the beginning of it. It looks like, looking at, the tech is starting to catch up. Ethereum's next upgrade, maybe its biggest test yet, different things like that. This Huobi thing, Kodak is buying all these other things. Like, news like this is what you want to see. And that's a good sign. So on the other front is, it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty in the global markets, right? You have Turkey, Argentina, their currencies, traditional fiat currencies are not necessarily, not even not necessarily, they're not as valuable as they once were. I think the Argentinian dollar, I don't know what it is, but it's down 80-70% over the past year. And I can't even, it's just crazy to think about something like that. And the weird thing is, like, that can happen to us. And what happens in those sort of situations is you end up, people with a lot of money, people like you and me who don't have as much money as those big hedge fund managers, everybody's looking to either sit on the sidelines and wait to place their money somewhere else, or they're gonna look to put their money into some sort of asset class that is either safe or it's yielding profits. And I think that finally we're starting to see some sort of turn in the global markets, and especially with crypto being sort of an alternative to fiat currencies, Bitcoin in particular, is very, very interesting for the next 5 to 10 years, because these fiat currencies seem to be some failed tests, right? Like, the United States is in some massive debt. What are we going to do, right? So to me, this seems like a very interesting opportunity for the crypto markets to kind of start slowly inching their way into the mainstream. Especially when big, massive countries, Brazil's on the teeter-totter of their currency. I think, there's a lot of countries worldwide who are on that fringe, and I think the United States will probably be there one day as well. And with Bitcoin, you can truly kind of take advantage and take control of your financials, and that's interesting. So anyway, that's kind of like my long-term crypto sort of bullish outlook, but like where are we going now? So this is the Bitcoin on the daily, the Bitcoin chart on Bitfinex. What we're looking at here is we have the 100-day and the 21-day. So this red line is the 21-day EMA, and we're definitely we're for sure bouncing off of this, or we almost bounced off of this 21-day. We got rejected by the 100-day, which was kind of to be expected, 71.39. What I like to do in these situations is to really decide where we're going, is I like to draw these horizontal sort of channel lines, right? And so what I like to do and how I like to do this is I like to start from the top, based on where we are. So find the most relative high. This is the most relative high, okay? Then I like to go out and look for the next relative high, okay? So we're just gonna draw kind of channel lines here. So that's another one, then we have another one here. And so what those signify to me is some resistance lines, right? So then next, what I like to do is go down to our relative lows. And so what we're looking at here is we have another low right here. And then it looks like we have another low somewhere in here. If I can get that one right there. Then we have another one down here. And we can even draw another one here. And so what these signify to me are sort of some kind of resistance lines. Or not resistance, support lines. And so this is very important to us, because this is where we kind of want to be hanging out, is somewhere within these channels. If we go outside of these channels, then we have to zoom out and kind of reevaluate where we may be headed. And this is just a very basic price action is king sort of analysis, right? So what we're looking for is higher highs and higher lows in order to sort of determine where we may be headed. And you can even draw, some of these on here as well, some of these relative highs as well down below if you wanted to, but I don't really want to clutter up the screen for you. But what we can see here is we had this low, we came up, made a new high. It was basically just a higher high. We came down, made a higher low, came all the way up here, made another higher high, and then we made a higher low. And so what we're looking for here is if we can hold on this line here, which is at 68.12, then to me, this looks pretty bullish. And where we're at right here in this sort of consolidation is we're going to bounce around in here, and it just sort of depends on if this holds or not. What kind of news are we going to get? What kind of bulls or bears are going to kind of battle this out? And what we kind of want to look for is we go down onto the 4-hour charts and we can get an idea of what's actually happening. And so what I'll do is I'll go down here and you can see some of the action that's going on. And we came up here, we made this high. Let's scroll out a bit. I did not want to do that. Let's move that back down. All right. So we made a relative high here. We made a higher low, very barely. We made sort of a double top, wasn't necessarily a higher high. We made a higher low, came back up, made a higher high, finally broke through the resistance, and then we came back down and touched on the support. Now, what's going to happen in here? We're seeing an inside bar right now, and what tends to happen, if the more inside bars you're going to see, the more chance of a break in either direction. And so we can kind of go back in time and look at that from the previous price action. Where was it? Where was I looking? So down in here, when was this? July 18th or so. If you look at these inside bars, you have like 3 in a row. It wasn't necessarily 3, but you have 2, 3 in a row here, and then you have a massive capitulation coming straight down. And the market's just reacted in a very bearish manner. The bears took over and just dumped. So on this inside bar right here, this little red candle, that's an indicator of a bear break. And so that's something you want to keep in mind is when we're looking at this future price action here, is what are we looking at? We're seeing an inside bearish bar here, and it looks somewhat similar to what we saw here. And what I've been calling for the past, I don't know, maybe month or so, is coming back down and making one more leg down to 52 is what one number I've been calling for a while. It could happen. If we test this support, maybe it won't happen. Maybe we'll continue upward. It's very difficult to. So the best way to tell if you're going down is we looked at the 1 day. So I worked from the higher time frames down to the lower time frames. And what we're seeing here on the 4 hour is we're definitely seeing a loss of the higher highs. So we're actually making lower highs now, and we're making lower lows as well. And that's not necessarily an awful thing, right? We had some nice support down here at this 68.12, 68.13, and that's kind of what we're hoping holds a support again in the future. I definitely expect us to retest this. I expect us to retest this. But we'll kind of have to wait and see. And you can even bring it back down even further into the 1 hour, and you can get a better idea of what's going on. And you can see the same idea is we're losing. We made our highest high, and then we made, we retraced down, and then we made a lower high, and then we made a lower low, and then we made a lower high again. And so what is going to happen next? Like, are we going to run out of steam? If we bring it back out to, say, the 4 hour, we can kind of get an idea of what's happening on the volume. And we're kind of grinding to a halt again. We haven't seen a whole lot of volume in quite some time. Let's bring it back out to the 1 day. And you can see back when we were in this bullish run, a lot of people are calling for this super massive bull market coming out of the gates. And I just don't think that's going to happen, because the bullish volume, like, we can just draw a horizontal line at the average volume back during this bull market, and it is quite a bit higher. It's maybe double the length, double as much volume during this bull run as we're having right now. And so I just don't see us coming out and just going to the moon. I know that there are certain people who are calling for these insane Elliott waves that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 100,000. And granted, maybe on a weekly or a monthly time frame that could happen, but I don't think that's going to happen on sort of the next, I don't know, month or 2 months or 3 months. Like, I think it's gonna take time, and slow and steady definitely wins the race. It's something I'm kind of actually really enjoying, this sort of consolidation that we've seen from the bottoms at 5,800 or so. Just having these swings has been amazing for day trading. It's been amazing for using Profit Trailer, actually, and so that's been something that I've actually been capitalizing on quite well, which has been nice. So I'm happy not going to the moon overnight. I don't need this again. It's not healthy. So with that said, on this daily, we had a bullish signal on the MACD down here a couple days ago, maybe like a week ago or so. And usually on the daily, the MACD does signify a pretty nice bullish movement, and that's indeed what we ended up getting. How long is it going to continue? This pinkish histogram here is not very large, and the difference between these two lines is the slopes of these lines are not, they're pretty parallel at the moment. And what that signifies to me is the momentum of this bullish run is not necessarily the same momentum that we would have seen back in a bullish trend, maybe back in here when we saw just the blue line. And I apologize if this is so small for some of you, but this blue line just went parabolic. It just went straight up during this bull run. And you're just not seeing that yet. We saw it a little bit back here, but if you look at this pink sort of histogram here, you can see I can draw another line here to kind of prove it to you, is it's a good 3 times the size of what we had, or what we're having, back here. And it's probably 4 or 5 times the size of this guy that we're currently sitting at. And that's something I like to look at as well, is just the MACD gives me a good representation of the momentum of what's happening in the market. So, I'm looking for us to kind of hold some support, go down onto the lower time frames, look for lower highs or higher highs, or lower lows or higher lows, and and that's kind of how I'm playing it. When you're using price action as king, just draw these channels and kind of see where you think these support and resistance lines may be. So we'll kind of get into Ethereum real quick. This is a monthly chart of Ethereum, from low to high. And we're definitely looking at this 0.786 line. We saw it tiptoe on this 0.786 twice. And that's, you know, maybe even back here. We saw it back here. This is very, very interesting to me because there are some people who are saying Ethereum is going on a bull run right now, and I just don't agree with it. Unfortunately, I think there's not necessarily, depending on how micro you get, I don't necessarily think it's another leg down. I think it's more likely we're still completing this ABC in here, and we're going to probably touch down to this 0.786 line that we drew from previous, you know, longer term market cycles, right? And that's something I like to look at on a much more macro scale. What I'll do is I'll draw this from the same point, and we can get an idea of where that confluence might actually be. You can see it touches here, 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 and then we zoom in, and we'll see this point of confluence down at the bottom here, right about 0.0377 Satoshis. So that's kind of where I'm looking for a bit of a buy zone there on Ethereum. If things get a bit hairy, I'm definitely going to be just kind of waiting it out, probably down to about here, the 0.0225 maybe. But I think this will offer some really solid support, and that's probably where we're headed next. Because if you go down, like we can look at this daily, we can get rid of this Fibonacci retracement, we can get rid of this guy, and we can look at pretty much all of the signals are telling us that we're, you know, except maybe the daily MACD, as I was just pointing out on Bitcoin, is we're actually looking at a bullish divergence on the daily MACD, which is kind of interesting to me right now. That's the first time I've seen that. I didn't really look at these charts, but we have a grinding halt in the volume of Ethereum. So that's one thing that kind of leads me to believe the bears may be more in charge than we think. You know, there's some triangles that you could draw there. We've been talking about this in my Discord actually. But another thing that, you know, there's a triangle, a massive triangle you could draw right here, on the daily chart. But if we look at this, you know, we can see we made this high, we came down, we came back up, made a lower high, and then we've just been making lower highs and lower lows this whole entire way down. And granted, that does have to reverse at some point. And what we could do is we could get really tricky and go into the Elliott wave theory. I just don't have enough time to really do a bunch of that because that does take a ton of time. But you can get even deeper into the 1 hour charts, and I'd actually be curious to see what's going on here, because we were making higher highs, higher lows, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. Very small, albeit. And then we broke down because we had these inside bars. And that's another thing that we talked about in with Bitcoin is, you know, generally with these inside bars, it's total consolidation. And it means that there's a break in one direction or another coming relatively soon. And you see it again here, and you had a pretty nice dump off. You see it again here, dump. And I think the same idea is I mean, it's sort of the same thing is happening in here. We have maybe 1, 2, 3 inside bars, or 2. And it's just, this is something that it definitely interests me with Ethereum, is I'm losing my train of thought here because this video has gone on too long. But long story short is I'm looking at Ethereum to head down to that 0.786 line where it confluences with this trend line that we've seen from a very, very macro point of view. And if that does happen, it's not that much further to drop. And the last thing I wanted to get into is when Ethereum, you know, a lot of us have been talking about, let's go to CoinDesk or CoinMarketCap. And what we can do is we can pull this up, and when you see Ethereum drop in price, what tends to happen is, and this is something I've been noticing more and more recently, is that the altcoins tend to follow Ethereum a little bit more than they're following Bitcoin. And that's not necessarily always true, but I think when Bitcoin starts to rise, altcoins tend to lose some of their value because everybody is trying to take part in that Bitcoin bullish action. But when Ethereum starts to fall, it's more of a platform. It's more of like the altcoin driver, right? Like Bitcoin sort of drives the entire securities and utility tokens, like sort of drives the entire market. But Ethereum seems to drive a lot of these altcoins in either direction. And I think if Ethereum ends up taking another hit, another dive, if it really does have sort of one more leg down, then I do think that the altcoins are going to take a little bit of a beating over the next, maybe a week, maybe less. Hard to say. Like, we really don't have a whole lot of room to go. Let me zoom in here and kind of just get an idea of how much of a percentage we got to drop to get to where we're going. So maybe like 6.5%. That, to me, that seems doable. And then I think we'll probably see the altcoins sort of get a little scared. And I think people will sort of start to pile back in. And I think that's a great buying opportunity for Ethereum, to be honest. So that's kind of what I'm sort of waiting for. Same with Bitcoin, kind of waiting for what's going to happen on this sort of channel that we're in. By no means is this my entire thought process. By no means am I making any trades on just this video alone. You got to do your own research and look into this stuff. Use your own indicators. This is not enough to make any trades, but just to give you guys more of a macro view of where I think things are going. I guess the last thing I could go over is this guy here, which is Profit Trailer. And you can see this is a smaller bot that I'm using, and it's just got a couple things going on. So we're using Defender. We've completed 1 and 2 rounds. We've completed ICX in 2 rounds, and that was impressive. Like, Defender is doing its job. Basically, it's on auto, and anytime a coin gets to, let's see, negative. Oops, this is on a VPS, so it's a little finicky. Anytime it gets to negative 6%, it's auto kicking in. And you can see with, this is a real pain. And you can see with, a smaller balance, like this isn't necessarily a big balance, budget or a big budget profit trailer that I'm running here. I think it's about a half a Bitcoin, but over the past 3 days, this hasn't been 7 days. It's been about 3 days. We're only getting about 18 trades a day. But the settings have been doing really well. So like we're at about a 1.12% based on our trading volume. So it's roughly like 0.3, 0.4% a day. But they're very conservative buying strategies. And if we go into here and we look at, let's scroll over. Yeah, I mean, you can see like negative 4% ADA, kind of to be expected. This thing's like, some people in our Discord say it's a dinosaur, but ONT -3, -1. We're kind of just waiting on DCA. We definitely we're defending a couple of these coins, Nano, ONT. So we're defending Nano, which hasn't been rebought. It's in waiting for buy. ONT is in here in the DCA, as you can see, with only $20. If we go into the pending log, you can see both those coins. I mean, they're both right here, and so yeah, I mean, this has been working well. -4% is not a bag in my opinion. This is just kind of it's a bit of a dump, and that's okay. So Defender's working. I'm using Feeder, obviously, with some really complex coin-specific pairings in this one. But I just wanted to kind of give you guys an update on how this whole thing is going, because I keep getting asked in my Discord, is it working? Are these things working? Is Feeder working? Is Defender working? Like, how are you doing in this market? And I'm just being conservative. It's simple. You can't get too aggressive in a market that's going south. So with that said, if you need help, join our Discord and we'll do our best to help you out. And like, we have a lot of people doing really well. So, ask questions and we're around as often as we can be. So with that said, guys, I'll catch you all in the next video.